Hello, Evolutionary Astrologer Bryan here for the first installment of this series I'm calling Chart Spotlight, where we're going to look at the birth chart of one Tulsi Gabbard. And for those of you who don't know, Tulsi is a politician, a female politician from the United States currently running for U.S. president in the Democratic primaries. Now, I don't want to get political in this session at all. The only reason I picked her was because I found her to be an interesting person. There are some astrologers out there who are really good at looking at the birth charts of all, the up-and-coming politicians and, based on the transits and where the planets are today, trying to predict whether or not they'll make it or how they'll do in running for president. And that's not my bag, that's not my area of expertise at all. So that's not my intention here. And I want to remove all of my political ideas from this assessment. I just simply want to look at her astrology symbols and find out what that's telling us about her evolutionary journey in this lifetime. So we'll be looking at a little bit of her birth chart, a little bit of her past life circumstance, her karmic signature in her chart, and then a little bit of where the transits are today and how that's affecting her. Now, I did pick her because she's interesting, but also I think the main reason I thought to even look at her chart was because I noticed that she was just getting relentlessly attacked, by mainstream media. And I was like, she's feeling a lot of pressure right now. And I suspect that she has some transits affecting her birth chart. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, or really the videos or articles from any astrologer on the planet, what they've been talking about in 2019 is this ongoing Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the sky, where they're exactly next to each other in the sky from our perspective here on Earth. And they're doing this cosmic dance all of 2019, and this hit this apex here in January of 2020, where they're exactly conjunct in the sky. Big subject, way beyond the scope of this reading, the intentions here. But if I had to distill in 2 words what those planets mean for us collectively, is pressure cooker energy. Because I guess you could say Saturn and Pluto have uncomfortable energies, and here they are, 2 planets next to each other, double dose of uncomfortable energies. Now, there's great meaning in that, again, beyond the scope of this reading. But I thought to myself, wow, she's feeling just an onslaught of pressure and attacks and resistance. And I said to myself, I bet the Saturn-Pluto is smacking her across the face right now. And I looked up her chart, and lo and behold, wow, Saturn and Pluto is playing a big effect in her life right now, which we'll take a look at. But that's the intentions here. It's just to see the evolutionary energies she's working with now. So with that being said, let's dive into the chart here. Now, keep in mind that I don't have her birth time, as you can see up here. I have her birth date, I have where she was born in Samoa, but we're working on a 12 p.m. generic birth time, so we'll be somewhat limited in our accuracy. At least we won't be able to use the houses, and we don't know her ascendant, also known as rising sign, which is pretty limiting, but we can still learn so much just from looking where the planets were when she was born, what signs they were in, and how they're interacting with each other. Now, as you can see here, you have a lot of symbols in Aries. This is the symbol of Aries here. We won't be counting the MC. That doesn't count here because we don't know the time of birth. But you have Mercury, Mars, the Sun, and Venus all in Aries. Wow. So 4 votes for Aries, and one of these is the Sun. The Sun is so important in astrology. Equally as important is the Moon. And here we find Moon in the sign of Leo here. So first thing we recognize right away is there's just simply a lot of fire in her chart. Sun's really the center of her head, her identity, her values and self-image. The Moon is the center of her heart. It's her soul. It's her feeling states, her emotional world. So Sun and Moon are 2 of the 3 big pillars in astrology and looking at anybody's birth chart. The third one would be the ascendant, which we can't use here. So wow, a lot of fire. Fire signs are action-oriented. They're naturally assertive. They act first, ask questions later, if we were looking at that element in a vacuum, which is always dangerous in astrology. But simply, she's just a fiery character. Now, Aries is so huge here, okay, because she's Aryan down to her toes. Not just because she has the Sun and Venus and Mars and Mercury in Aries, but because Mars is the planet that rules Aries. Every sign has a ruler, sometimes two rulers. And whenever a planet's in its own sign, it's effectively supercharged. So here we have a very strong Mars, the god of war and the sign of the warrior, and it's next to the Sun. Now, since the Sun represents our identity, any planet next to the Sun will then fuse with that identity. So yes, she's in Aries. We can add some extra oomph to that because Mars is next to the Sun, but she's also a very Venusian sort of warrior, which we'll describe here. So wow, Aries down to her toes. Certainly a warrior. Aries on steroids. And, that can be described as a bit of hell on wheels, but good thing she has this ace in the hole, this beautiful Venus right next to her Sun here. And Venus adds some softness to this combination, okay? So Venus, the goddess of love, the goddess of peace and tranquility, the planet of attractiveness. Now, Venus is one of the most beautiful things in the sky. We all know it when we see it. That bright star in the sky. So it represents aesthetics as well. So relationship and aesthetics are Venus's domain. Okay. But it is attractive, and she's pretty, But people with Venus on the Sun typically have this attractiveness emanating from deep within them, meaning they're just very likable. They tend to be people-oriented. Now, with the Venus on the Sun, we could say her destiny is bound to relationship, meaning a lot of her evolution is going to happen through her relationships, her interpersonal relationships. She's not meant to do this alone. She's meant to have the catalytic impact of certain individuals upon her. So deep relationship here. The question is why? Well, we'll get to the karma in a bit. Now, why might somebody need to emanate attractiveness in any given lifetime? Well, quite simply to attract people, because she has, relationship stuff to work out. This is also a strong vote for, an affinity for beauty and elegance. And she seems very elegant on stage. She's dressed in those nice white dress coats, and she's just presents herself very beautifully. And also, we look at this symbolism, the archetype of the goddess, Venus, goddess of love, goddess of peace. So goddess energy. And then we take all this Mars, the war god, in the sign of Aries, the warrior. If we were to distill those into a couple words, the warrior goddess, the warrior goddess. And when I look at her, on stage, I think, God, she looks like Wonder Woman, It's pretty trippy. And then another way to read this is, Venus, goddess of peace, the peaceful warrior. And what does she fight for in her politics? She's very much about, foreign policy and wanting to calm down our war efforts, to put it mildly. So she's a peaceful warrior fighting for peace. Very interesting. Now, Aries, what is the point of being a warrior? Such a strong, pulse of warrior energy in her chart. Well, and how does that look outwardly? Well, she's a staunchly independent person. I would say that. Just a lot of Aries energy. Aries is very independent, very headstrong, an indomitable will. Probably, has a quality of pluck, and verve to her character. She's very colorful. Now, she also has a bit of a hero archetype in her. That's connected to Mars in Aries. So, she's relative immunity to panic under pressure. She's good to have in an emergency. If somebody's cut and bleeding, it's like, oh, thank God Tulsi's here, because she's going to remain cool, calm, and collected in the face of a crisis. And there's kind of like, I'll cry later sort of mentality to her. And of course, we know that she's dedicated her life to being a combat medic. Now, looking straight at the evolutionary path of following the path of the warrior, what is she attempting to learn in this lifetime? Where is a lot of her growth and evolution going to occur through? Well, warriors face their fears. So there is some existential fears that exist within her that she has to break through in order to become braver, to become stronger. That's the evolutionary path. And that takes everything I've said about Aries already in an interesting light, because when I say, independence, pluck, and verve, and good under pressure, hero archetype, doesn't sound like I'm describing anybody deficient in courage. And that's true. But from my perspective, she can't come here to accomplish what she's come here to accomplish. She cannot fully manifest her destiny and fully self-actualize without facing some fears. Okay, the demon fear guards the gate to the garden for her, and she has to plow through that. So her lifetime is endlessly, breaking through comfort zones. Now, me personally, if someone said, oh, we're going to force you to run for U.S. president, how do you feel about that? I would say scared, probably for starters. It's probably the last thing I'd want to do, being thrust into the public eye in that mess that's, U.S. politics. That would scare the pants off of me, And, it may not be it may be less triggering for her, but it seems scary to me. And I'm sure it is an expansion of her comfort zones in many ways. So you could say on the evolutionary level that she's doing her deep spiritual work by running for U.S. president. That's one way of looking at it. And we have Mercury here. And Mercury in Aries, Mercury is the sign or the planet rather, of communication, of the mind, how we think, and how we come across. Well, her communication style and her perceptual filter is just very warrior-like. It's assertive. She's not afraid to speak her truth. It can be an aggressive way to communicate, words that bite, words that cut. And again, luckily she has this Venus softening her a little bit, because with Venus on the sun, she has the ability to connect with many different personality types, much different than her. Part of the challenge of that is therefore people will overestimate the amount of common ground they have with her, because she's just so likable, probably on a very interpersonal level, So, but yet, this Mercury here she's not afraid to speak her truth. She speaks like a warrior with that action. Now, I'm tempted to jump into this Leo moon here, but I'm not going to do that yet, because that's tied in intimately with her karma, which I'll get to in a little bit. But let's look at her Saturn-Pluto that she's experiencing right now. So I just pulled up the transit chart, and you can tell here this inner ring is Tulsi's birth chart, and the outer ring is going to be the transits, where basically that means where the planets are in the sky today. And here we can see big bad Pluto and big bad Saturn here up at the top of the chart, and they're right next to each other. And when I initially thought to look at her chart, I was thinking, okay, well, her Pluto-Saturn is probably in a hard aspect, like a square or an opposition to either her sun or her moon or both, just because of the immense pressure she's feeling now, I bet. And wow, I'm not always right, but I sure was right on the money here, because the Pluto and the Saturn are in a direct square, 90-degree hard angle to her sun, Mars, and Venus. You can see here the Pluto's at 21 degrees Cap, and then the sun's at 22 Aries, Mars 20 Aries, and then Venus 24 Aries. So an exact square, more or less. And then when these energies crescendo, when Saturn and Pluto enter their exact conjunction in January, I think it's maybe January 10th or 12th or something like that, They'll hit an exact conjunction, I think, at either 22 or 23 degrees Capricorn. I'd have to double check. But when they hit this apex maximum pulse of Pluto-Saturn, they'll just be sandwiched in between her Sun and Venus. So wow, she's getting smacked across her chart's getting smacked across the face by Saturn and Pluto. So pressure cooker. Here we find Pluto and Saturn representing these, broadly speaking, uncomfortable energy, putting a lot of pressure on arguably the most sensitive place in her entire chart. And Saturn's, squares themselves, hard angles, are uncomfortable too because they apply friction in our lives. Now again, always with evolutionary astrology, we ask the question, why? Why is she feeling these uncomfortable energies? And you could say, okay, because of Saturn and Pluto, but that doesn't really, give us any information. We want to look at what we're learning. That we're always learning something. It's just we're not a puppet and the planets have our strings and we move in more or less predictable ways. There's always a lesson in this very meaningful universe. So the pressure cooker representing for Tulsi in an albeit uncomfortable fashion, an opportunity for tremendous growth, because Pluto, known as the Great Malefic, is basically representing an opportunity for her to mature, to gain more integrity, more self-respect. There's commonly some growing pains with Saturn square the Sun as well. It's, again, not comfortable. But the great prize is an accomplishment of a truly great work and then a deepening of your own maturation as a person. And then we add Pluto to the mix. Pluto, the planet of transformation, is saying through Saturn, through the maturing through the Saturn, we will transform into something else, applying great pressure to her. Now, we can even ask again, why? Why is she experiencing this now during her life? Now, the Dalai Lama, I think, is who said it. He said, if you want to understand your karma, look at your current circumstances. So we look at her current circumstances and we recognize maybe there's some root from her karmic past, especially with Pluto involved, because there's some schools of thought in astrology that Pluto is directly linked to karma. And to look at that, we look at the south node of the moon here in Aquarius. And this is, for me, when I was looking at this is when it gets really interesting here. So there's different ways of reading the nodes in astrology through the evolutionary lens, at least from the school that I studied with, Stephen Forrest. They look at the south node of the moon for past life understanding, because south node represents habit. It represents past, in this case, past lives. It's the energy our souls are used to being immersed in, kind of a been there, done that energy. So by understanding, the sign and house, we don't know the house because we don't know the time of birth. But just by looking deeply at Aquarius and the rulers of Aquarius and some other symbols that are in aspect to this, we can learn so much about her karmic circumstances. So Aquarius is known as the rebel and the revolutionary in astrology. So there's some cliches that come to mind that we can paste onto her past life story. And it's that she was a square peg in a round hole. She marched to the beat of a different drummer. And she probably didn't mind shaking up the apple cart from time to time. And we can see in her current life, she's definitely shaking up the apple cart. And she's also being a rebel in certain ways. But she went against the grain of cultural norm. She resisted the coercions of culture in the last life. Maybe the coercions of family, too. We don't know exactly in what areas of her life without knowing the houses. But just simply put, she thought outside the box. She was unique. She wasn't like the herd instinct. She wasn't like the 95% of people out there. She was a rebel. Now, always looking at the past life story, we want to understand, okay, what did it feel like to be her? Well, probably alienating. If you think outside the box, okay, if you're an utter rebel in the face of your community. You can be the butt end of a lot of projections, a lot of judgments, so deeply misunderstood. So alienation, probably leading to some distance or detachment within her. Aquarius is always, or also an air sign, and air signs are on the mental plane. So probably manifesting, in her psyche, more of a comfort level residing in her head rather than her heart, because the distance, the detachment, leading to a certain level of indifference because of the pain of being so different. There's a band I really love called the Lumineers, and they have a song named Stubborn Love. And one of the lines from that song is, "I'd rather feel pain than nothing at all. Love is the opposite of indifference." The opposite of love isn't hate. Hate still is passion and, has a charge to it. Indifference is the opposite of love because it's more lifeless. It's very, very low on the scale of consciousness. So her in the past life getting to a place of indifference because of being so misunderstood and being outcast, feeling like an outsider or an exile in her own life. Now we can also look to the two planets that rule Aquarius to give us some more information here, which are the more modern rulership of Uranus here in Scorpio, and then the more classical ruler of Saturn and Libra. And Saturn in Libra is interesting here because it's also next to Jupiter. And Jupiter is the king of the gods in astrology. It's the great benefic. It's, linked to, luck and expansion and good fortune. Some of the ancient astrologers had kind of a fortune teller way of describing somebody with a strong Jupiter. It was power, honor, glory, and riches will be yours. Not always true, but it's a fun line to say. So she probably did have a relative level of success, maybe even being famous, well known in the past life. Now, of course, that's continued in the current life. Certain level of maybe power, influence. Jupiter's one of the biggest bodies in the sky. It's got a lot of gravity to it. She really took up some space. She kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. Probably a lot of generosity of spirit, too, with Jupiter. And then both these symbols, Saturn and Jupiter, are in Libra, a relational sign. So a lot of relationship dynamics in the last life as well, causing her some issues. Pretty vague statement. But again, without the houses, we're pretty limited here. And then the Uranus. Uranus is fascinating here because here we find it in Scorpio. So she was very scorpionic in the last life as well. And Scorpio folks are intense, psychologically intense. And they are sensitive to the underlying, let's say, psychology that is underneath human behavior, driving it into manifestation. It's the sign of the psychotherapist, the sign of the detective. But what Aquarius and Scorpio have in common is one word, and that's truth. And they have different meanings for that word. Aquarius is more a truth of self, raw individuality, whereas Scorpio is more about being truthful and honest, sometimes harshly so, needing to speak hard truths sometimes. And the reason why I find this interesting is she's also very scorpionic in this current life. And you might look at this chart and say, well, gee, I don't really see how that's the case. She only has this one planet in Scorpio. But we recognize that there's two planets that rule Scorpio, Mars and Pluto. And as we see in her birth chart, she has Mars on her sun, so strongly placed, easily the strongest planet in her chart, I would say. And then she has Pluto in a dead opposition to her sun. You can see Pluto here at 22 Libra, sun at 22 Aries. Here's the sun representing her identity, and it is so linked through the opposition to the Pluto. Now, oppositions are very powerful, probably just as powerful as the conjunction. It's just that it brings more tension in our psyches. So Pluto is also representing Scorpio, and it's also about speaking hard truths. she is deep and psychological in this lifetime. She has the mind of a really good psychologist and detective. And, there is an instinct in her to ferret out the truth. There's also a directness with being so Aries, too. Now, Aries is linked to anger on some level, emotionally. And it doesn't mean with the warrior that she's on the warpath emotionally or bloody-minded. But it means that she does have a hot button, probably. But if I wanted to get her to show her anger, which is not a good idea with her, by the way, I would do it by lying, by being indirect, by being wishy-washy. And Pluto here, it's like she's got no patience for dishonesty. And nor does she have patience for denial, compartmentalization, collusion, any of these things, which is abundant in life, but, also in politics too. So this truth sayer, she is a truth sayer. She is a natural psychologist, I'd say. But this is not something she just decided to show up with in this lifetime. Like, I think I'll be deep and psychological in this lifetime. No. Ruler of Aquarius and Scorpio. This is a tool she's been sharpening for lifetimes. And she has an instinct to be honest. Honest with herself through the Aquarius, but also speaking hard truths to people. Now, if you speak truth to power, it's usually a bad end, And I think she's speaking truth to power in a lot of ways currently, and she's certainly feeling a blunt force attack, especially from, mainstream media. But what's interesting here is this seems to be indicated in her karma, too. Here, let me bring this back to one chart so it's more obvious here. So here we go back to her ruler here, and we recognize there's a Mercury opposite the ruler. Oppositions in the past life story represent the brick wall of reality that she just couldn't get around in the past life experience. And here we have Mercury representing the mind, representing communication in this sign of the warrior. So her brick wall, it looks like a lot of verbal attacks, speaking truth to power. Mercury is also related to, on some level, journalism. So that's another potential. Again, if we knew the houses, it would be easier to tell. But attacked by journalists, which of course we're seeing now. Now, also, I haven't mentioned the moon here. Moon opposite the south node. And again, oppositions is the brick wall of reality she couldn't get around. And moon is the great mother. Now, on one level, it's linked to family. So we could have some deep family karma here, but I can't hang my hat on that without knowing the houses to confirm that. Another way of reading it is clannish sort of energy. And here we find it in the sign of Leo. Leo, the king of the beasts. So king energy or queen energy. One way to read this would be the royal family. Yeah, the royal family. The brick wall of reality she couldn't get around. The power structures of the world, the upper crust of society was the brick wall of reality she couldn't get around. And when you speak truth to power, it's usually a bad end. Being attacked with words, a battle of the minds. So interesting. Now, the north node of the moon, down here by the moon itself, is opposite the south node, obviously. Again, south node is past. Well, north node is future. It's like, what's her karmic medicine? What's the set of experiences that she wants to have in this life? What's the energy she really wants to embody or fold into her consciousness so she can heal, grow, and move on, Well, that's reflected in the north node of the moon. And the north node really is nothing but a good idea. Most people never reach it because it's opposite from where we've come from. It's on the opposite side of the scale of polarity there between Aquarius and Leo. So therefore, to really master our north nodes, to reach it, takes relentless effort and consistency and focus. Because we all suck at it, we all suck at our north nodes. And hers is in Leo, and it's next to the moon. So since the North Node, I call it the point of enlightenment just because it's so hard to access. And if you do, if you master your North Node, you'll really get an A+ in this incarnation, I believe. And you'll graduate and move on to the next lesson, whatever that may be. But, it being next to the moon here, and it being such let's say, a hard point to really function within in this current life, it's like she placed her moon, her heart, her soul on the hardest place in her entire birth chart, which is a conjunction with the North Node. It's like she said coming into baby body Tulsi as a soul, she said to herself, if I do not evolve, North Node, I will become depressed emotionally. So she put a lot of eggs in one basket in this lifetime. She really bet the house. So a right relationship with your moon in your chart is really the basis of emotional happiness and well-being and the secret of healing for her. And then a right relationship with the North Node, basis of enlightenment. So I make my happiness and healing contingent upon my evolution. If I do not evolve, I will become unhappy and depressed. Okay? She has what it takes to get it right, obviously, but it's a challenge. I will achieve my evolutionary intention, and that will be the basis of my happiness, healing, and well-being. So with the Aquarius South Node, this is a strong vote for, again, her getting to this place of indifference and wanting to hermetically seal feelings from her life because of her rebel spirit. So this implies she needs a great healing in this lifetime. And here we have Moon, the secret of emotional happiness and healing. But yet it's not easy work. So this happens on two levels, basically. Needing to heal herself, shed those unshed tears from the past life experience, so that she can be ready to embody her gift as a healer herself. So you can't even contemplate becoming a healer without healing yourself with Moon on the North Node. And it's a good indication in her life. You see elements of her being a healer in her current life. She's a combat medic. Wow. So that's a strong indication that she's doing her deep emotional work. Again, I don't know anything about her personal life. I don't want to get into that. But, she is going through a great healing. That Lumineers line. I'd rather feel pain than nothing at all. Love is the opposite of indifference. So you kind of have to feel to heal. And Leo's a fire sign. You could say her heart is warming up in this lifetime. She's come back to roar like a lion. Might tweak the metaphor a little bit and say, cry like a lion, let it all out. And embody more Leo is to create. When I say roar like a lion, let your heart out. People have no idea what it's like to be her. That's what it's like to have a Leo moon, because she shines so brightly into this world. So therefore, the path of creativity being a major path of evolution for herself. And it seems like she's letting it all hang out there. She's being herself in very Aquarian fashion, but, it seems to me anyway, she's roaring like a lion. So again, running for U.S. president, doing her deep spiritual work, it's kind of a funny thing to say. But from the evolutionary astrology perspective, I think that's quite accurate. So the birth chart is really quite powerful, as we're seeing here, especially when we integrate it with the past life story. It's like, great, we have this energetic template, this blueprint of the psyche, our birth charts. But again, why? Where did we come from in our evolution to get to this place over the course of many lifetimes? And evolutionary astrology can give us some insights into that. And if you're interested in knowing about your own journey through this lens of evolutionary astrology, here's a shameless plug. I'll put a link below in the show description to the website there that has listed my services. I offer a birth chart reading, past life reading, and other ones as well. So I invite you to check that out if you want to dig deeper into your own symbols. Now, before I wrap this up, I have one more thing I want to mention here. And that is really, I feel like, her ace in the hole in her birth chart. The moon is kind of like the linchpin of her chart. So much is really dependent upon her healing and roaring like a lion. But really, we have this sweet Neptune here. and a beautiful trine to all the three of these planets, the Mars, the Sun, and Venus. And trines are 120-degree angle. They support whatever, the planet that's trined will support that. There's mutual, let's say, benefit to these planets. So Neptune is the god of the sea. And that's a metaphor for the sea of consciousness. It's the planet of mysticism, the planet of spirituality and connection to God. And here it is supporting her identity as a warrior, as a peaceful warrior. So I knew nothing about her, if she was spiritual or anything. Of course, I went online, looked at Wikipedia, and then found out she practices Hinduism. And she's a practicing Hindu, and she's a Samoan American, and she's a member of Congress. It's like there's that Aquarian signature, because she's so utterly different. But on the spiritual side in Hinduism, she is one of the paths called Karma Yoga. And this is one of 4 spiritual paths of Hinduism. And it's based on the yoga of action. Now, to a karma yogi, right work really done well is actually a form of prayer for them. Okay? And it teaches the spiritual seeker that they should, act according to their dharma, without being attached to the consequences, either positive or negative. And this path is, that's so her, right? Is so supportive. Her set of beliefs, or ideologies, which is, the Neptune's in Sagittarius, so spiritual ideologies, feeds into or supports her being a warrior. And warriors, as I said at the beginning, Aries and just fire signs in general, are action-oriented. So being a karma yogi specifically is doing actions that are in alignment with cosmic principles, Neptune and Sagittarius, as a form of prayer. Now, she keeps her own spirituality close to the chest, and this is retrograde, implying that this planet has a lot of is more introverted. There's a lot of inwardness, and really she has all 5 of these planets up here in retrograde, all the transpersonal planets. So a lot of retrograde planets. So she keeps a lot of it close to the chest, which is great. But I get the sense of her spiritual foundation, her understanding and connection to God is what's feeding or supporting her Aryan courage to do something that is seemingly very scary. So I think that's really her ace in the hole. And we can see how, she's doing work that she feels is right for her, doing the right thing, aligning her behavior with cosmic principles, and her enacting that in her life with positive action, as a warrior should, is a form of prayer for her. It's integrated into her spiritual walk. And I really feel is, her ace in the hole, as I said, is feeding her this courage to do what she feels she needs to do with her own conviction and indomitable will. Again, regardless to the consequences, which I think she's feeling some of those consequences now. So very interesting chart. Obviously, it's very fascinating to look at the karma and how history is repeating itself in the current life so she can learn this lesson. I mean, she's meant to learn the lesson of the rebel and to roar like a lion in the face of judgment and to be assertive and brave and cultivate more courage in your life. And she has that foundation of spiritual belief systems really supporting her. Ultimately, she wants to access that moon conjunct her north node and heal. And there's indicators in her life, I think, that she's accessing her moon next to her north node, because I see her as a healer of others, as a combat medic, wanting to also to reduce the pain and suffering in the world by, stopping some of these wars going on. And she believes this very strongly. And, who knows what the outcome will be. I think many astrologers would look at the Saturn square and Pluto square her sun and say, probably not looking good. But who knows? She may have some other opportunities that open up for her down the road, maybe a cabinet spot, maybe even vice presidency, something like this. I didn't really look at, 2021 astrology for her. And again, that's not really my bag. But yeah, just really interesting chart. And it gives us some key insights to her journey. And I think she's working with the symbols in an evolved way, according to my limited perception and observation of her. Naturally, public figures, we project an image onto them. They feel like they are a character that we feel like we know without actually knowing them. But it's interesting to take a peek at her chart and see how some of these dynamics are replaying in her life. Thank you for joining me in this deep dive into the symbols. And if you like this, let me know in the comments below. If you have other charts you'd like me to take a look at, put them down there. I'll take them into consideration. And yeah, thanks for investing your time with me today.